Hello family, this is African Esquire and I'm here with a new video. I want to talk a little bit more about this issue that's going on as far as the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. If you haven't heard already, the president of Russia put out or spoke in some type of setting. He has said that Africa is a cemetery for Africans. So we talked about it a little bit on the FAL Soapbox live stream and we all gave our perspectives on it, but I want to give a slightly different perspective that I think we should also have to keep in mind on this quote. So if you haven't heard the quote yet, I'm actually going to play a video for you right now that will give you some visuals and also just to show the quote.
Africa News Update. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in the African limelight for racially profiling the whole of the African continent by saying that Africa is a cemetery. In his exact words, he was quoted saying, "When an African becomes rich, his bank accounts are in Switzerland, he travels to France for medical treatment, he invests in Germany, he buys from Dubai, he consumes from China, he prays in Rome or Mecca, his children study in Europe, he travels to Canada, USA, Europe for tourism. If he dies, he will be buried in his native country of Africa. Africa is just a cemetery for Africans. How can a cemetery be developed?" Russia has recently been taking more interest in Africa, signing 19 military cooperation deals in the continent with countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. While in Central African Republic, Russian troops have been training the army, which has been fighting against militia groups who are competing to take control of the country. The Central African Republic has a large deposit of gold, diamonds, and uranium, and Russia's growing role in exploiting them appears to be a quid pro quo for providing military support.
So as we spoke about on the FAL Soapbox live stream, a lot of what he said is actually true when you look at what's going on all over the continent of Africa. I mean, the president of Gabon is over in Saudi Arabia getting medical treatment instead of developing Saudi Arabia to actually get medical treatment in his own country. You have African leaders, what do? Or African businessmen. If their children are of a certain age, they send them outside of Africa to get educated. People buy cars from the outside, clothes from the outside. Anyone who has the ability, as soon as they get the ability to actually purchase, those purchases are made outside of the continent. So obviously there's truth to that. But I think I want to focus more so on the last statement, and that is that Africa is a cemetery for Africans. How could a cemetery be developed? The reason why I want to focus on this because we have to understand, yes, the statement is true if we're only talking about the attitude that African people have shown towards the continent. However, if you want to talk about how the world sees the continent of Africa, then you have to talk a little differently because clearly it's not just a cemetery. If it was just a cemetery, you wouldn't have all of these Western powers fighting just to get a chance to take from Africa. If it was a cemetery, it would not be the continent that is the basis of the economies of every single economy that is actually doing well in the world. It wouldn't be the basis of so much exploitation. It wouldn't be the basis of of the riches of the billionaires, the millionaires. It wouldn't be the place where people would have to go to and exploit in order to find a way to actually be on the top in this world. So we have to understand that it's a critique, absolutely, of the mentality of Africans. However, it shouldn't be seen as being a truth. If anything, we have to understand that this is the way that we view our homeland instead of it actually being what they say it is. Understand honestly that it's not that everyone views Africa this way, especially Europeans. They might make it seem like that it's the worst place in the world, or that's the place that gives them the most hell. But in reality, if it wasn't for Africa, places like France, the US, any type of Western power would not be able to exercise the amount of power that it has over the world for so long. So it's not that it's a cemetery. The issue is that it's a perception. we perceive ourselves as having to go outside in order to get validated. But that perception has always been instilled into us by colonialism. So I want to go to a speech by Professor Pielo Lumumba, and I think he really breaks down very nicely the perspective that has been given to us, and the fact that we feel like we not only have to go outside of ourselves in order to get help, but also it's been instilled into us to get our sense of validation from people who are not ourselves.
First of all, let me thank you. I've prepared 2 papers which I believe will be circulated because they'll not be projected. But if you can see, first of all, I want to agree with the Honorable Minister. I've done 2 pictorials. One of them is described as Africa at the dinner table. And if you look at Africa at the dinner table, Africa is on a plate and it is meat. And the diners at the dinner table are France, the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union, the Chinese, and progressively the Arabs. And my second picture is the African hotspots. It's not visible from there. But if you look at Africa today and you make a clean sweep with your mind, there are different conflicts of different intensity in Somalia, in northern Mauritania, in northern Mali, in Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea-Bissau, in the Cameroons, in South Sudan, and one can go on and on. And there is a sense in which Africa has always been alive to the question of interference. And I want to submit to us that in the minds of what I'll call the conceptual West, they think they have a divine duty to instruct Africans what to do. True. And in the minds of many African leaders, they think that they have a divine duty to accept what they are told. That, in my view, is what the Honorable Minister was talking about, the mindset. And this is something that has been examined. We have seen France and its very pernicious presence in Africa. We know what they did in Burkina Faso against Thomas Sankara. We know what they did in Mali or the Sudan against Modibo Keita or against Sekou Touré in Guinea. Pernicious to the core. The Portuguese, we know what battles had to be fought in that area. And let me...
So even though Vladimir Putin said this, it's clear that he doesn't believe that Africa is a cemetery. If he believed that, then he wouldn't be so anxious to actually try to get into Africa. I mean, you've seen this out of the first video that they see an interest in going into Africa to get the gold. So it's not that they see it as a cemetery. Instead, that is the mentality that has been taught to us. And he's just pointing out something that is true, but it's true because we've been taught this mentality and we actually live it out and we still commit the same mindsets that have been given to us from colonialism. So many of you probably agreed with the statements that Vladimir Putin said, but the question is, what do we do now? Do we just agree with him and say, hey, you hit the nail on the head, you're right, this is what we do? Or do we try to change what we do, change our behaviors? And ultimately, all of us are a part of this. All of us fall into similar mentalities. All of us actually do these actions that he's talking about. So the question is, are we actually willing to change the way that we view our homeland? Instead of looking at it as somewhere we go just to say, oh, this is where I'm from, or this is where my people are from, is this somewhere where we actually see potential? Because the thing is, Africa of every single continent has the ability to be developed. So when he says at the end, how could a cemetery be developed? He knows darn well that it could be developed. The issue is that people's mindsets have to be changed. And the second that you stop viewing it as a cemetery and start seeing it how every single other person in the world, every single other entity, every single other political system views it, because they all see the value. You know, over and over again, I keep feeling the reinforcement when you look at what's going on with China going into Africa, Arabs going into Africa, every single other race. It's kind of like the gold rush, like everyone's trying to rush to get there because, like many people have called it, it's the last frontier as far as development. Everyone else is rushing there. Everyone else is trying to build there. And building, of course, is a form of development. So obviously everyone else sees it as being developed. The risk is that if Africans start seeing it as being worthy of being developed, because if we start seeing it as worthy of being developed, then that will trump everyone else's interests, and that actually will probably lead to war, because they have set their mind that this is what they're going to do, that they want to see that their plans come into fruition. And while we're in the dark scurrying, trying to look like we are the West, appear to be the West, trying to live in the West, trying to have that lifestyle of the West, they are very busy trying to develop what we have left. So understand that it's a mindset. And the second that we change the mindset, and instead of looking at it as just somewhere to say that we're from, just some type of place to put on your t-shirt and say, hey, Africa, when we start actually seeing it as somewhere that we can actually go to and actually invest in, build. There's so much wealth of building materials. There's so much wealth of natural materials. There's so much wealth of land there compared to anywhere else in the world. That's where we'll actually have a change. And that's when we'll actually be a threat. Because currently we're not a threat to any of these powers, because they can just go right into these nations and basically give some money to a few people, and those people will take care of their interests and make sure that their interests are fulfilled. So just to sum up, we have to take this as not just saying, okay, yeah, what he says is true, but let's change the mindset. Let's research. Let's understand the many ways that all of us, anywhere in the diaspora, could actually invest in our homeland. It doesn't have to be that all of us automatically go over to the homeland to live. It could be that we incrementally build property, build businesses, build homes, build things there. And that ultimately is what leads to development. But however, sitting back and just saying, well, yeah, it's true, that's not going to do anything. So hopefully this is a teachable moment for us. And hopefully we can actually pull ourselves together and actually make some movement towards actually changing the dynamics that we have with European powers and actually empowering ourselves to take ownership of our own destinies. So that's all I have for this video, and I will see you all in another one.